Guys, we're going to be talking a little bit about tires today and tire construction, et cetera, et cetera. So let's get into it. So there's different types of tires over the years, what's called bias ply, bias belted, radial. Everything is radial tires now, which means we got steel belt construction inside our tires. So when you look at this cross-sectional cut-out piece of tire, you can see the steel cords in there, right there, that form the bead that seats against the rim to seal the air. See the inside of the tire there, and you can see that there's some nylon in here as well. So it's got rubber and nylon in there with that steel cord in there. So some different parts of the construction of a radial tire. That wheel type in there that's a steel wheel, and usually we have aluminum wheels. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So we have passenger car tires. We have light truck tires. So it'll either say P on the tire here or it'll say LT. So let me show you one. So over here on this tire, you've got the tire size here. It says 185/65 R15. Well, many times it'll have a P up here for passenger tire, or it'll have an LT here for a light truck tire. A light truck tire is going to have more sidewall load capacity compared to a passenger tire, and that's what makes them different. They have more plies on the side, which gives them a lot more load capacity. So some really good tire information at this website, and you could take your phone and take a picture of that. Some really, really excellent tire information to learn about different types of tires at that website there. So I'll leave that there for a moment so you can take a picture if you like. Okay, let's continue. So types of tires. So we've got different brands of tires. We've got different use of tires. So is there a difference between brands? Is Michelin really as good as everybody thinks they are? Is Toyo's or Pirelli's or BF Goodrich or Kumho's, et cetera, et cetera? So over the years, what I've found is, seems to be a difference in tire quality. Michelin is a French company, and you kind of pay for the name, but they seem to last. They really do. I'm a fan of Michelin tires. They just seem to give a lot of long life. Toyo's a good tire. I like Toyo's. A Falcon's great. A Kumho's great. I mean, maybe a little more low cost tire, but a lot of it's just how long it lasts, and we're not talking about performance tires, but just general use. So our use goes like this, general touring, general driving, all season, whether it's, so something that works good in the summer as well as the winter. And then high performance is something that's sticky, that's going to stick to the road and do real well when we're turning hard. So our tread design's got to think about a few things. So our tread design's got to think about how long we want the tire to wear, so mileage. Do I want to get 50,000 miles out of the tire? Do I want to try and get 60? Or do I really just care about performance? I'm just really love driving up Highway 1 fast on those turns and just back and forth. Okay, so how well does the tire handle? So how long does it last, which is mileage, and how well does it handle and perform? What about ride comfort? A short sidewall tire, it's kind of stiff, transmits more road shock to the car and to the person. A taller sidewall tire tends to give a little more and be a little more cushy. Road noise. If I get a real aggressive tire for going off-road and in dirt, it's going to make noise. And if it's a real smooth profile tire, then of course it's for the highway. It's going to be real smooth driving, but it's not going to do so well when I have to get in gravel and dirt and sand, etc. Also traction. So road noise and traction really go together because typically the more knobby and more aggressive the tread, the more road noise I'm going to have, but the more traction I'm going to have. Traction can be a function of both the tread design, but also the tread compound. So a stickier compound, which is softer, tends to stick to the road, gives me better traction, but I lose mileage, wears out faster, etc. So that's the things we need to think about when we're considering tire. And the one thing that's not here that I didn't put here is price. What about price? And then these days, what about looks? People are like, I want the tire to look like this. I want to have this sidewall exposure. I want to have this lettering showing it, blah, blah, blah. So here we go. Tire sizing. How do we size tires? So in this example, this tire has a P at the front here. So that's a passenger car tire. P there, that's the sectional width, the aspect ratio. It's a radial tire. It's a 14-inch rim. Passenger tire. Sectional width is 185 millimeters. 80 is our aspect ratio. R is radial, and 13 is rim diameter in inches. And let's talk about these a little more specifically. So there's our example of 185/80 R13. So it's a passenger car tire based on this P as opposed to a light truck tire. It has a sectional width, which is a sidewall to sidewall dimension in millimeters of 185 millimeters. So that means from here to here is our sectional width. From side to side is our width there. That's our sectional width. Next is what's called the aspect ratio, and that is this number 80 is a ratio between the sectional height, okay, from the bead seat up to the top of the tire, and the sectional width. That ratio, really what you're saying is that the height is 80% of the width, okay? And if it has a 30 series, we're saying the height is only 30% of the width. So that would be a low profile tire, etc. So the height is 80% of the width is what that aspect ratio means. And of course the R stands for radial tire up there. Okay, that R right up there is for radial tire, which everything is today. Unless it's a very big 18-wheeler trailer tire that is a bias ply tire. Okay, so that's how we do our dimensioning, or at least most of it. And then one last thing is the rim diameter. So the rim diameter is, on this example, is 13-inch, and that just means the inches across the diameter. Let me show you that. So I've got some rims here, and I'm going to put my tape measure across it. And so from the bead seat to the bead seat, you should see that this is a 17-inch rim. This one over here, from the bead seat there to the bead seat here, that's a 14-inch rim. This guy here is a 13-inch tire, so we go from the bead seat, excuse me, I'm hung up on my camera there, from the bead seat, that's a 13-inch. So this one, I believe, it says it's a 15-inch. You can see it says 15-inch there. So from bead seat to bead seat, it's 15-inch. So that number is a non-negotiable number, meaning you can't put a 14-inch tire on a 15-inch rim or some such thing like that. You've got to put a 15-inch tire on a 15-inch rim. You got to put a 14-inch tire on a 14-inch rim, etc., etc. Okay, so it's interesting that they measure the sectional width in millimeters, but the rim is given in inches, and I'm sure there's a good reason for that, and I don't necessarily know the reason, but you can only put a 14-inch tire on a 14-inch rim, or a 17-inch tire on a 17-inch rim, etc. Okay, so wheel sizing. So there's the rim width, which we were just showing you, which is bead seat to bead seat in inches. Okay, the rim width is bead seat to bead seat in inches. You know, where that spot on where the bead seat touches, where this guy grabs the rim right here, this bulge, if you will, where that contacts the rim, that's the bead seat. Okay, so the rim diameter we mentioned is given in inches. We just said that. The next thing is what we call backspacing. Backspacing. So backspacing is the flange seat to the outer rim edge. So backspacing is this dimension from this axle flange surface to the outer edge of the wheel. So if I put a straight edge here and measure from here to here, it's what we call backspacing. So if you think about it, more backspacing, which brings the front up, sticks the tire under the car more. Less backspacing, moving this flange over here, pulls the tire out from under the car. So again, backspacing on this wheel would be from this surface here out to this edge here, coming straight out like that. That's your backspacing. There's another related term that we'll look at right here on the screen, which is what we call setback or wheel offset. I'm just going to try and show you right there. So setback or offset, which is flange seat to rim center line. So what that is the setback or the wheel offset is from this flange seat to the center of the wheel. Okay, right there. It's just another way of of dimensioning where this flange is in relationship to the rest of the rim. So flange seat to the center of the rim, whereas back spacing is from the flange seat to the back inside edge of the rim. All right, so next is what we call the drop center. The drop center of a wheel is what we use for removing the tire and installing the tire. So when you look at this wheel here, and I'll drop the camera so you can see it. Wow, I can talk. So you'll notice that if you look at this tire this direction, this wheel in this direction, there's a lower spot over here than over here. So it's this side that the tire has to come on to and go off of. We would not be able to get the tire on and off of this side. We got to use this side with this deep groove. We call this the drop center. So look at it on a steel wheel. So on a steel wheel, it looks like this. There it is there. You got this big center area here. And you'll notice that it's to one side or the other, right? It's coming to this side. There's a shorter distance here than there is here. This center is moved over this way. So we're going to take the tire on and off from this side. Okay, that's the drop center of the rim. All right, so next is the number of lugs and lug hole spacing. The number of lugs and lug hole spacing. TireRack.com does a really nice job putting together this chart with all kinds of tire information, sizing, etc. But here's how they do your lug hole and lug hole spacing. So if you look at that, let me get that over here so you can see it. So what they do there is they show you how, for example, on a 5 lug, you take a line that's tangential to two of the bolt holes to the center line of the other one, and you measure from that line to that line, and that's what they call the bolt circle. Okay, if it's a 4 lug, that's how they do it. So they're looking at different bolt circles there. So we have a certain number of bolts, but we also have a certain width, if you will, or spacing between the bolts, which is our lug hole spacing or bolt circle. Okay, so next is we can, by the way, we can have 4 lug, 5 lug, 6 lug, 8 lug. 8 lugs typically tire trucks, 5 is typically passenger cars, 4 is some very small passenger cars. And we'll have a 4.5-inch bolt spacing or 4 3/4 bolt spacing, something like that. And so those are things that we can measure. So a resource like TireRack.com is really great for getting a lot of tire and wheel information, etc. So next is tire ratings. So tires have what's called a UTQG or Uniform Tire Quality Grading. It is a series of 3 measurements: tread wear, traction, and temperature. And I'm sorry that doesn't focus that well. I apologize, but it's just the way the camera looks at this screen. But tread wear, traction, temperature. So the UTQG on this tire, I have a little picture, has a tread wear of 280, traction A, temperature A. So this is a relative number. It goes on a scale from like 0 to 700. The higher the number, the longer lasting the tire is. So a 280 would be a not very long lasting tire, but it's a pretty good performance tire, pretty sticky. Traction A, most everything has traction A, but only more expensive speed rated tires have temperature A. So usually you'll see like 400 or 600 traction A, temperature B, but A is better, B is lesser, and C is even lesser. Okay, so this uniform tire quality grading system is required by the federal government. The Department of Transportation, or DOT, requires that all tires have this grading, so people have an idea of how long lasting it is in terms of tread wear, what its traction rating is, how long or how good it does it at getting hot, because tires get hot after a lot of fast spinning going fast down the road. Tires are heavily regulated by the federal government because they don't want people crashing and dying. Tires have what's called a tire performance criteria, or TPC, tire performance criteria. That TPC includes a load index and a speed symbol. Here it is right here. So this is upside down, but has a load index of 89, and on a chart that gives us an index of how much load that tire can handle. And the H on a chart refers to how fast it can go at a sustained 30-minute speed and not overheat. Because tires, when they go fast and they get hot, will eventually start to come apart. They'll basically start to delaminate. So here's an example of 80W. 80 is the load rating, and the W is the speed rating. And those refer to numbers on a chart that we can look up and know um, what their exact units are, etc. Okay. So here's a speed rating chart, and on this one, it tells us that um, the S is good up to 112 miles an hour. That's a sustained 30-minute speed. A Z-rated tire is 149 plus, et cetera, et cetera. These are not the same every year. They do change year to year. So you want to get the chart that matches whatever year you're in and see if it's, because they will change somewhat. But those give us an idea of our speed ratings and how fast, how much speed the tire can sustain for 30 minutes. All right, a little bit about maintenance and service of tires. Um, but one thing I do want to show you here is I want to show you these tire pressure sensors. There's a tire pressure sensor there. All modern cars since 2008, I believe. I think it was 2008 we started requiring tire pressure sensors. And these have a little radio transmitter that goes to a transceiver in the dash and communicates tire pressure information. Turns on that tire pressure amber warning icon if we drop below 20% on any wheel. And unfortunately, those have batteries in them that only last 10 years and then they wear out. So everybody's got tires that are tire pressure monitors are failing. We had a car in for an oil change today. TPMS lights on. Both sensors on the driver's side are out. They're not talking to the transceiver. The batteries are bad. On the right side, they're fine. So in terms of maintenance and service on tires, we're going to rotate every other oil change or every 6,000 miles. That's my recommendation. You should be changing your oil, in my humble but correct opinion, every 3,000 miles. And every other oil change, if you rotate the tires, you're going to enhance their life. Front wheel drive tires are really hard. Front wheel drive cars are really hard on tires. Rear wheel drive cars are not so hard because when we're driving the car, and we're turning, it tends to wear them out. So a couple of different tire wear patterns. You don't necessarily need to write this down because we have charts in the shop and charts all over the place, but we can just go front to back if they're directional tires and we can't put them to the other side of the car. Or we do a rearward cross for rear-wheel drive and four-wheel drive where we cross the rears to the front and we bring the front straight back to the rear, or a forward cross where we cross the fronts to the rear and bring the rear straight forward. Okay, so two different ways of rotating tires depending on whether it's rear wheel and four wheel or whether it's front wheel. And again, directional tires got to stay on the same side of the car. And if you have bigger tires on the rear than on the front, then they got to, the smaller ones got to stay up front and the bigger ones can go out back. Air pressure. So I have forever said that you want to pressurize or air up tires and inflate them 10% less than the max listed on the sidewall of the tire. You can consult the driver's door sticker that has the tire pressure there by federal government requirement, but that's a compromise between traction and tread wear and longevity and etc. I find that the manufacturer of the tire will recommend a tire pressure. For example, this tire is a pretty standard tire with a 44 psi tire rating for air pressure, and by the way, you can see where that is. Let's find it. Okay, so right up here is where it is, and it says max load. Let me see if I can get it to focus any better on that. Maybe not. There it is. At 1,168 pounds at max pressure of 44 psi cold. So this tire, if you put it 10% less, that would be 4.4 pounds, and that would be about 39.5 pounds. But my advice is I would go ahead and put these 15. I've changed this from 10% to 15%. Let me show you why. So if and obviously this tire is worn out real crazy, and that's why I've saved it. But if you overinflate a tire, it's going to bulge in the center, and you're going to wear your tread out in the center. If you underinflate the tire, it's going to squat, and you're gonna wear out on both sides here and here. So we want it to be nice and flat, so we have good contact with the road, which gives us better traction. Minimal contact with the road as much as possible for gas mileage, etc. So it's a compromise. We want traction, but we also want gas mileage. Okay, so I'm a big fan of 15% less than the max listed on the sidewall of the tire. That seems to wear them really well and seems to drive well, etc., etc. As of 9/1/2010, sorry, uh, federal law requires adjusting air pressure on any car coming to any shop. And we should check our tire pressure at least every month, but any car coming into a shop by federal law has to adjust the pressure on that. A technician has to adjust the pressure on that. And the federal government's done that because we know that tire pressure is a big factor when it comes to not just vehicles handling safety, but also to gas mileage. If I don't have enough air pressure in the tires, I'm going to use more fuel. People who have cars that they don't drive very often sometimes will fill their tires with nitrogen because it is a larger molecule. It won't let air out as fast. It has less moisture in it as well, so the rubber doesn't deteriorate as fast. So pressure loss due to temperature change, expansion, contraction, etc., is very low. So people like to put nitrogen in their cars. Jay Leno and all his cars got nitrogen in the tires because they will stay filled up and they don't have to fill them up very often. If you've got a green cap on your valve stem, that means it's got nitrogen, or at least it's supposed to mean that it has nitrogen in it, etc. So let's talk about wear indications on tires. So side wear, where we've got wear on one side of the tire here, is either what we call camber wear or toe wear. So one side of the tire being worn is either a couple of misalignment angles or misalignment of a couple angles, either camber or toe. Camber is the lean of the tire towards the engine, away from the engine. Toe is the pointing of the tire in towards, like pigeon-toed, or out bow-legged. Okay. So the right front outside shoulder on the right front tire, if the outside shoulder is worn first, that's usually an indication toe out. The left front inside shoulder wearing first is an indication of toe in. Cupped wear is a shock problem. So in other words, see how there's bald spot, bald spot, bald spot. The tire is bouncing. And let me show you one like this. So this tire is really interesting because if you look at it, and you can kind of see on the camera, there's like a bald spot, a tread, bald spot, a tread, a bald spot. This tire was leaning like this because it had a bad strut. So the vehicle is here. It's leaning into the vehicle, and the strut was bad. So on the road, it was going down the road as it spun, bouncing. And I mean, look carefully at what's going on here in this tire. I mean, you can see this bizarre ridges here as you go around. And if you felt this with your hand, I mean, it's just all undulated like this and going in all different types of directions. So that's the result of a bad tire, because we have a tire wear, cupped wear we call it, because we have bad shocks. Next is both shoulders wearing. So if we have tire wear on both shoulders, that would be underinflation. And center wear like this one would be overinflation. Okay, so underinflation where it's worn on both sides, overinflation where it's worn in the center. A shifted belt can cause a severe pull. So sometimes when you get a car that's pulling really hard to one side and you're trying to diagnose it, then what we'll do is we'll go and rotate the tires and get those front tires on the back. Go test drive it. See if the pull's still there. A lot of times the pull will be gone because a belt that's shifted inside a tire can make the tire essentially in a cone shape. It's kind of like this one looks kind of a cone shaped if you look across the front there, and really makes the tire pull the car to the right or to the left. Feather edging can be a toe problem. Feather edging is where when we roll our hand around the tire we go across like this and we feel like sharp edges. It's smooth this way, sharp this way. It's kind of more of a bias ply tire issue, so it's kind of an old school issue, but it still does it still is an issue and something that needs to be paid attention to if you do see it. Okay. So next is extreme outside edge wear or hard cornering wear that, believe it or not, your mom and dad can kind of tell if on the very, very outside edge, and I don't have an example of it here, but if on the very, very outside edge right here, it's kind of all worn off right on the edge, on the outside of the tire, we can tell you've been cornering really, really hard. You've been pushing it. And I have seen it done before. So if parents are on their game, they can tell you if Johnny or Susie has been out there Ricky racing. Okay. Flat spots. So if you have a big flat spot on a tire, big flat spot, that may have been because somebody locked up the car trying to avoid a collision, and a really extreme hard braking. If you don't have ABS and it locks the tires up, the car slides severely, those tires are done. From then on, when you drive, you're going to have a wump, 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 and you've got to replace those tires unless you want to live with that, which is not good to live with. So here's some miscellaneous tire notes. So first, the UTQG, Uniform Tire Quality Grading System, is a federal law by the Department of Transportation. I already said that, but anyways. Treadwear bars. Let me show you what the treadwear bars are. So the treadwear bars are government regulated high spots that are between the tread, and you should be able to see them. So there's one right there, and there's one right there. It's just a raised section. It's a 16-inch raised section. And when that's worn straight across, the tire is legally worn out, and the highway patrolman can give you a fix-it ticket. And he will, because he doesn't want you to have too little tread and not be able to channel water away. And so you hydroplane when you can't get the water away. So the treadwear bars show when there's a 16th inch of tread left, and there it's legally has to be replaced. Soft tires have low treadwear ratings because they're sticky compound. So we might have a 200 or 300 treadwear rating. That means it's not going to last a long time, but boy, it sticks. They're like suction cups around corners. So they really handle well. You have to ask yourself the question, are the tires worn due to their material? Is it a soft tire, or is it, something else? But usually if the tire's wearing evenly and it's wearing out quickly, it's probably just soft material. It's probably a performance tire. So tire pressure and rotation are critical to wear of tires. We want to rotate the tires, get the fronts on the backs, get them to wear evenly, put them through different dynamics, because there's quite a bit of different dynamics between front and rear, because the fronts are steering and the rears aren't, unless you have a rear steer car, very few of those. Tire pressure obviously is critical to tire wear, overinflation, wearing in the center, underinflation on both shoulders. Radial tires definitely run cooler than old bias ply tires. It's not really something you need to write down anymore because we don't have bias plies anymore. Okay, let's talk about wheel balancing. A little bit about wheel balancing. So types of wheel balancing. So there's basically a couple of types of wheel balancing. There's static wheel balancing, or what used to be called bubble balancing. And what that means is, static balance means around the circumference of the tire, is there a light spot or is there a heavy spot? So if the tire, let's say, is heavy over here, then we're going to put weights over on this side to offset the weight of this. So we're going to look at static balancing being weight around the circumference of the tire. We're going to add weights to offset that. The next one is what we call dynamic balancing, and dynamic balancing is side-to-side imbalance. So for example, is the tire heavy on this side and light on this side? If it's heavy over here and light over here, we're going to add weights over here to offset that, so this tire doesn't want to do this going down the road, and static balancing would cause it to go up and down going down the road. So our machine is going to balance out around the circumference, whether it's static balancing, as well as dynamic balancing side to side. And I'll be showing you a demonstration on that. So we can balance the tire off the car with a computerized machine, and that does static and dynamic at the same time. But we can also balance on the car, where we're actually, if we balance the tire off the car and then put it on the car and we rebalance, we're balancing the hub and rotor or drum. So let's say I got an old American car and I balanced the tires off the car. I put it on the front end, still vibrating a lot. The hub and the rotor or drum may be out of balance. And so we can spin the tire up on the car and actually balance the tire on the car, and I'll be showing you how to do that. So just a couple other things here. Tire pressure monitor. So a tire pressure 25% below OE spec, I said 20% earlier, 25% will illuminate the TPMS light. 100% of cars have to have it. As of September 2007, I think I said 08, so it's actually 07. And nitrogen causes the tire to run about 20% cooler. Just some miscellaneous tire pressure notes, but just some thoughts about tire pressure monitors in particular. Okay, so we're having to replace a lot of these now because we have to have special tools to read them, to when we replace them, to program them, etc. Okay, so that's what we have for tires. I'm going to follow this up with a couple of demonstrations and a couple of videos most likely. Thanks so much.